Hello and welcome to another episode of Atypical. It's me, Simon, your host, and I'm joined by my co-host, Joey. Morning, Joey.
Morning.
How's it going in Joey land?
It's going okay in Joey land.
It's a Friday morning. I mean, it's what more can we do? It's heading towards the weekend, which means probably more work. But it's looking quite warm, actually.
Nice sunny
Anyway,
day.
sunny day. We like sunny. Sunny days bring me to happy. Anyway, so this is just a short filler episode. We were hoping to try and get a bigger one in this week, but obviously, as you can all understand, we're heading into sort of holiday season and just getting people's diaries together. I mean, I was away in Scotland for the whole of last week, which, by the way, lovely. I highly recommend the Outer Hebrides. Some really, really beautiful beaches, great mountains to walk. I'll tell you that. Very enjoyable. So one of the things I thought we'd have a quick chinwag about is obviously, I don't think anybody could have got away from the news this week, could we?
No, well, I mean, I have to admit there was a point, the point where my dad came into the kitchen yesterday and was like, "Have you heard?" And I was like, "Yes." I don't think you could avoid it. It's like, "Yes, one of his ministers has said that that the chancellor who he appointed yesterday has said that he should resign." I was like, "I think you're a bit behind since you've been for breakfast, Dad." And he's like, "Why?" And I was like, "Because he's resigned. The chancellor's resigned." And I was like, "No, try again." So
It's ever since Tuesday morning when Lord MacDonald went on to Radio 4 and sort of the pebble that started the avalanche there, I think. Trying to keep up with it. I was chatting to one of my work colleagues, Sally, and so every now and then I just get like a number from her. It's like, "Oh my God, it's 37 now." I was like, "Oh, I can't." When I looked a minute ago, it was 20 something. So what's going on?
Oh yeah, because by the time from starting his committee hearing to the end of it, it was just live updates of every minute. There was just another person who'd resigned.
There was the one chap on the liaison committee who was just looking him in the eyes as he sent him his resignation letter and didn't say a word. It was, oh dear. I don't think I can really quote the leader of the opposition, but it really was the ships leaving the racks.
Mm.
Oh, but I mean, one of the things that I was talking to one of our other co-hosts who's not here today, but I was talking to Kim about this yesterday, and just all this stuff going on. I mean, obviously everyone's, not everyone, but most people are absolutely fascinated because it is sort of the breaking up of the government and what that could mean for us all. But I don't know about you, but I was hyper focused on it for like 2 days, and it is exhausting. I met up with a friend last, and we had dinner, and we resolutely avoided talking about it. Just so tired. We're just like, "Oh God, I can't think about it anymore. My brain has been racing for 2 days. I just need to go to bed." And I think it's something that everyone probably feels about this kind of thing. And one of the things that I was thinking about this morning was, is this quite a good way of explaining to neurotypical people how it can feel for neurodivergent people when we get sort of a hyper focus on things? Is there's so much going on all at once, and oh my goodness, it's quickly moving and moving and moving. As we were just saying, so every time you looked away, a new person had resigned. I don't know, does that feel like it could be a quick way of explaining to people who don't experience easy overload, I suppose, what it's like for some neurodivergent people?
It's a good analogy. I think it's important to remember. I think most people experience overload. Obviously it's the speed of which it happens, which is difficult to convey. I wonder the problem with that analogy at the moment is so many people are so fed up with the news. I don't think a lot of people watch it anymore.
Well, yeah, it did get to that point, didn't it?
Like, "Oh, I haven't watched the news for months." And you're like, "Oh, what's wrong with you people? I know it's frustrating, but you still have to watch it. Otherwise, how do you partake in society?"
Yeah, I think for me, it's just trying to find analogies to explain to people how very, very quickly things that might seem perfectly normal to others can become overwhelming. Because I'm reasonably good at avoiding bad hyperfocus, but I know plenty of people who just get caught up into things very, very quickly. I mean, I do it sometimes if I'm not watching myself carefully, whereby it's just, oh, the thing is happening, and then you get so like you're trying to keep up. Oh, no, it's the shifting sands beneath you thing. And I don't know, I'm always looking for ways of explaining it to people who might not feel that normally. And so I don't know, the last few days of all the political shenanigans and, the man being appointed to Chancellor, who, by the way, was investigated by National Crime Agent's own finance a few years ago. But hey-ho, we've only put him in charge of all of the country's finance. That's an entirely different podcast, but let's not go down that road. being appointed, and then the very next day turning around and saying, "Hi, boss, me again. You remember yesterday where I threatened to resign unless you gave me a top job? Well, as it turns out, I think you need to now go." And just trying to keep up with all of the backwards and forwards of this. In the day of 50 people resigning and one person getting fired. I'm like, how, who, what? I don't know. Part of that, I think, is just me going, is this a good enough analogy to explain overload of information?
Do you shut down from it and just like almost bury your head in the sand when it happens? Like, no, not dealing with that. Boom, gone. No matter how important it is when it happens.
Pretty much, yeah. I reach a certain point where I just go, I cannot deal with this now. I have to put it down and just get away from it, and I can't think about it. And that has happened once or twice in work in the last few years.
Is it an angry put it like this almost the self-denial, this thing isn't worth my time, oh screw it, get rid of it? Because I think with the news analogy, when people and I think it's the same when you confront people with an idea they don't like, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, and instead of dealing with it, they just dismiss it out of hand. And I think that happens with the news with people when it's fast like that, or it's news they don't want to hear. It becomes sort of dismissed and they discredit it out of hand so they don't have to deal with it. Whereas I'm assuming that's not the emotion you feel towards overload.
No, so I mean, for me, it very much depends on what it is. Very occasionally, if it's an overload thing, I will just hit a certain frustration point and go, "Oh, I can't deal with any of this," and throw it out the window, and then refuse to. My brain absolutely refuses to re-engage with it until either I'm talked down by someone I know and trust, or it just reaches a point where it no longer matters. But normally, it's a case of I become kind of frustrated with myself, and it's almost like a depressive cycle. Just go, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. And it's that is quite frustrating, because obviously I've tried to sort of I suppose try and train myself not to have that reaction. But it's one of those things that I suppose is sort of slightly inbuilt, and I find it very, very, very difficult. So my main way of dealing with it is just not to allow myself to get into a position where it looks like I might well get overwhelmed, or to try and find, I suppose, like turn off points. So if I can see it building, try and find a way of diverting onto either a different track and doing something else, or telling someone, there's too much going on here, please help. And I think that was the biggest learning point for me, actually, was just saying the please help part, or just being able to send a message to like a group of friends going, I'm really struggling today, everything's coming in too quickly, what do I do? And knowing that one or two of you will just send me back a quick message saying, hey, do you want to have a quick conversation, or divert me with memes about otters or something.
Yes.
Which, by the way, that is the best road sign in Britain.
It is indeed, yes.
But anyway, so talking about the news, one thing I did spot was that last night there was a Proud in Business discussion in London. It was a thing being held at the Royal Society of Arts. By the way, are a fantastic organisation. They have lots of interesting things on their website. Check them out. And anyway, there was a panel brought together to talk about being LGBTQ plus in the workplace. And there's a really interesting statistic here, and I think I sent you the article earlier on, whereby it says that 41% of queer people go back into the closet when they start a new job. And one of the things that somebody said there sort of strikes with me, because obviously, I'm when I was an apprentice and so forth, I have lots of interaction with people in education and moving into their first jobs and so forth. And one of the panelists, and I'm going to quote them directly here, people who felt comfortable being out in education are not at work. And I sort of wondered, is this, and it says 41%, that feels like a huge number. But then again, I suppose in a lot of industries or workplaces, it is a form of masking, I suppose. It's not presenting your authentic self.
Really common in education, because I think, especially if you've got difficult children that you're teaching, you don't need something else that could hinder you. And there is that fear, which I would hope is less of an issue now, but at the same time, regardless of whether children are homophobic or not, it's still a weapon to be used against the teacher who's making them do things they don't want to do. Why give the extra ammunition? I think as well, there is also a fear. Sadly, you have that ridiculous link in people's minds with any homosexual and paedophilia.
Oh yes, absolutely.
In education,
you're
homosexual, therefore you must be touching my child. And if you get wrongly accused of something and you happen to be known that you're gay as well, you're just like, well, why have I nailed my own coffin? Which is an insane world we live in. That those two things are still continually bouted about together. So there's that. I think it is
I think in the
worrying.
wider workplace itself, it's still a big issue of
It's
people.
yeah. I say I wasn't in the closet when I started my job, but I wasn't like throwing it about, and you still have to have that conversation with everyone again, and it's not a problem. No one's ever had an issue with it, but it's that constant. You never stop coming out because every time you meet a new group of people,
You're coming
you're
out.
doing it, and when there's then your livelihood it's sort of at stake, it does add a pressure to not want to come out, whereas it's it is bonkers that you have to keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the research I was looking at earlier on. I mean, I found a Stonewall Scotland article that said that's anything up to 61% of people who were open about their identity before starting the job went back into the closet when they started. And there was some really interesting research done by, of all organizations, Vodafone back in 2018. So it's a little bit out of date, but I suspect that some of these numbers are still reasonably germane. Is that up to 76% of them have who took part in this research admitted to hiding their sexual orientation or their gender identity at work at least one, with at least 43% of them claiming that they thought that being open about with who they are would affect their success. And I think it's one of those things that trips over into our normal area of neurodivergent. But obviously, I think queer identities are how easy is it for people to fully take part in their work without feeling forced to disguise who they are, their authentic selves, because they fear career limitation or even in some cases a physical threat.
I wonder as what would be interesting is if we get hold of if they asked, because obviously there's 76% hidden their sexual orientation or gender identity. I wonder how if they ever had the information of what if there was a sexual orientation or gender identity that people were more likely to hide. Whether maybe people thought that one was less acceptable than another, or because obviously especially with gender identity at the moment, it's still a very new thing for a lot of people. Trying to get their head around, especially when you've got non-binary or people who either don't identify or do identify as both genders, but not necessarily at the same time, or both at the same time. So that can be an incredible juxtaposition for some people to hold in their head. And I wonder whether some people feel their gender identity is too kooky for mainstream people, and that might be hidden more than another one that because I know a lot of, I mean, you're more likely to find an out gay person male than an out bi male.
Yes. I'm hoping
Thankfully,
that's changing because I
it,
mean
it does seem to be, but
yeah.
with the number, I mean, I've just literally just got rid of the awful app that is Grindr, but there was an enormous number of people who were not going to put their face or send you a picture of their face who were bisexual men, which they were quite happy to say that they were bisexual, but not show you their face ever.
And do you think
They're
that's
like,
a shame thing almost? Is they feel like they can't fully admit to who they are?
yeah, it's sort of where gay men were 30 years ago, I would suppose. It is considerably more prevalent now that people are happy to say that they're bisexual by the looks of it, but
I'm
around
wondering if
correct people.
I mean this is my own experience here and might only be my own opinion. If people are more likely to now to say that they're bisexual because that's a useful label to grasp onto the fact that actually in many cases the sort of the gender and sexual identity of the person is mattering less and less, and it's more about the whole person and
Mhm.
sort of for a lot of people, that sort of one. This is where I wish we had Kim here. She's better at language than me. Is I suppose it's almost that. Is it moving into actually the base state is more towards pansexuality? It's not so much about the gender identity as the person.
Yeah, very much
Uh,
so.
um,
I can't, because I mean I always refer to the Kinsey scale. I like the Kinsey scale because it's
oh, we're going to do an episode on Kinsey because he was the most brilliantly hilarious person to talk about. But anyway,
yeah
sorry, I interrupted you there.
he because the way in which the scale is, and he admit that it was a very basic scale and people don't not fit into scales, but because the way which it's labeled where it's 100% heterosexual and then it's not 100% sexual but only incidentally homosexual. So
Mm.
I I've never really thought about it, but something happened. It came up at the time. It was a good idea. I enjoyed it. I don't feel bad about it, but I wouldn't do it again. Or that it's that sort of yeah, it happened. Cool. Then there's so that's the zero is completely heterosexual, and then you've got incidentally, and then you've got more than incidentally, then you've got bisexual, and then start going the other way where
Mm.
you would only incidentally have had you're gay, but you would have only incidentally had sex with a woman, more than incidentally, sorry, then incidentally, and then completely homosexual. And I like that because it gives that slight nuance to sort of yeah, fuck it, why not?
Yeah.
It's sort of because when you haven't got a shame in the moment of doing something, people will do, and it doesn't matter whether it's sex or anything else. If you don't have a sort of a shame behind something, and this is why people do mad shit when they're drunk because the inhibition's gone. People will kind of just do what they want.
Mm. And so
Which
do you
is
think
why.
then? Sorry.
Well, it's just saying that's why I like the kin scale because it gives you that. Yeah, I could see myself doing it in under the right situation so you're not holding people to that very rigid bisexual, gay, straight set of labels because I don't even myself as a very comfortable homosexual man know that some women are bloody sexy. So I couldn't possibly say that I am completely gay
Mm.
because of that. So I do think it's more likely as things go on, people will be comfortable just sort of being themselves and not putting themselves in that box. And if the right person comes along, the right person comes along.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is, progress from sort of the 1960s, where it'd be 100% of LGBTQ people hide who they are in the workplace because,
Yes.
illegalities. But I mean, the fact that it's still, in the 40% range feels, I don't know, it feels slightly sad actually that people do sort of go back into the closet when they start new jobs. And I wonder if part of it is, I suppose, still a fear, especially in certain industries, that you'll be ridiculed for it, or it might impact your career opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People, but I think the number of people who are out at work is considerably higher than this survey suggests. It's just that the survey is skewed more to the fact that people have done it. The question they have asked would suggest that it was only for a small period of time that they were back in the closet, not that they went back in all the time. So the question they've asked gets people who were in the closet for 5 hours at work when they went back in, and people who are still in the closet, and they're all in the same statistic with this.
Well, I think it'll be interesting if we can find some research that mentions neurodiversity in the workplace as well, and whether or not people try and hide that, because we know that they
Do
do.
you ever feel like you stop coming out about being neurodivergent?
Oh God, no! But then
No.
I'm totally open about it. I wear a badge on my lanyard. It's on my signature on all of my emails because I feel if I can at least be open with who I am. I include my pronouns in there. I include ask me about type things in there, which includes things like ask me about autism in the workplace.
Well, we
Because
have.
I feel if I can do that, if I can show it, it might help other people to go, that person over there has autism, they have ADHD, they are differently sexual or gendered or whatever they might see me as. I mean, I just see me as a sort of weird conglomeration of things. But for me, it's a case of I'm not. It's not. I don't think people are ashamed of who they are. I just don't particularly have any shame in who I am most of the time. As you will doubtless know, sometimes I will just say and do things because they just seem like the right thing to say and do. And I don't even, if I looked at them as an outsider and go, oh, that's a bit rude or whatever, I don't feel bad about it. But for me, it's just a case of kind of goes back to sort of the work I did when I was with the apprenticeship stuff, going and representing apprentices at parliamentary things, speaking on European committees and various other things. Very much just a case of I'm comfortable enough most of the time, and I admit I do hide myself, but I'm comfortable enough most of the time in who I am to create a space for people who are far, far better than me to feel that they can be their authentic selves and can start to sort of say, yeah, I am gay or transgendered, I am autistic, I do have ADHD or dyslexia, and just sort of normalize it, I guess. And that for me, that if I can achieve just getting one or two people to feel more able to be open about themselves, that's for me, that's a win in life.
This is what you see with it when you look at a lot of EDI things and you talk and you listen to stories, especially with it's a thing that comes up with a lot of black actors now that they're older. They said, watching. It was Whoopi Goldberg I was watching the other day. She was talking about Star Trek, and she said when I was growing up, there were no black people in the future. All science fiction was white. There were no black people, and then there was a horror in Star Trek. And obviously, there was still a huge amount of racial tension in America and in the world, and there still is. But in the future, this was a black person who was serving. She was a commissioned officer, and although you might argue that she was essentially dictating what the computer told her, so she was the secretary. So we can discuss how much progress was made with that. But anyway, at the time, and there was obviously the famous interracial kiss and everything else, but it was visibility, and that was the reason why part of the reason why she wanted to become an actress, and why she was then on Star Trek when The Next Generation came around, because of that role model, that visibility.
Gave her the thought that she could break through that glass wall as well, and be more of herself.
It normalized the idea that was something that could be, and I think it's the same. That's why part of the reason why I think I always have some form of rainbow on my person, and the same I think with when you've got your pronoun badge on and that sort of thing, it normalizes it for people, and the person who's reading it might not mean anything to them, but they've seen it, so it starts to become more normal, and the more normal it becomes, the less stigma there is about it. I think I'm just going to be. This is a tangent, isn't it? So
we are a pro tangent podcast.
Oh no, yes, I know. I'm going there. Really, really.
I have infected you with tangent.
I am. It's a handbrake turn happening here. So OnlyFans has, I think, made an enormous difference to how people think about sex work. In the last,
we're going to do a whole episode on sex work. That's definitely one which I know I've got 2 or 3 people lined up who want to talk,
because it's talked about quite a lot. There's a lot of very famous people, very influential people who are making a lot of money, and I think ultimately when people have realized, actually, these people can make, well, some people are making millions of pounds a year on their OnlyFans. And money is always the massive lubricator of pretty much anything.
Unless buy plenty of lube, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, capitalism does not care who you are or where you've come from.
And I think when people see success in terms of money, it drastically drops that stigma. But it's to say it has normalized it, and the number of people I know who have considered starting an OnlyFans, even if they were only to make a couple of £100 extra a month, it's a big difference to their lifestyle, especially with the cost of living crisis at the moment. But they're not worried about the stigma of it. They're actually just, their biggest concern is they didn't think people would want to watch them, regardless of what the content was. They just didn't actually think they were good enough to draw attention, not that they were worried that there might be some sort of stigma behind it. So I think that's a fascinating change of it talked about enough that it then becomes normal.
I mean, I'm not sure I could even get people to pay for this podcast, much less me being on an OnlyFans. So
depends what you're offering.
Yes, moving very swiftly on. Anyway, I think both of us need to actually get back to work now. So thank you so very much for joining me this morning, Joey. It's been a pleasure as ever. And for our listeners out there, thank you for sticking with us for another week. We're hoping to get back to a more normal schedule with the rest of the crew very soon. And we look forward to, I was about to say seeing you again soon, but this is an audio medium. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Coming into your ear.
Talking, is it? Because that suggests a two-way street.
Well, we're talking and they can listen.
Well, that's true, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much as ever, Joey, and have a good day.
You too,
Simon. Bye all.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a lovely day.
Right, and now we end the recording. Right, how do I stop record? No, how do I make him stop? Damn it, Craig, stop!
Quick, this is where we say all the pro-Nazi things that we would normally do, and then you have it on a recording. I mean, oops, you're still recording. What? Boris Johnson was an amazing prime minister.
I mean, he really, no. We just say all the slurs now. This has now become slurs chat.
I mean, he was memorable.
Yes.
How's that?
Somebody once said to me, "Oh, Boris Johnson, he's quite a character." My only response was, "In that, it would be better if he was fictional." Yes.
Yeah.
I think